you.
Now, you are from New York, or you come from another place?
I was born in Connecticut. I was born in New Haven. I grew up in Hamden, Connecticut, and I went to New York right after high school.
I see. Oh, to work. But then you became a geologist.
Then I became a geologist.
Where did you go?
It was very difficult to be a geologist in New York because all the rocks are covered up.
Oh, the Bronx is full of rocks.
So I went out to Arizona, where I did all my field work in the Grand Canyon, and I finished my studies there. Then I went on to drill for oil shale, drill for oil, clean up toxic waste.
So you really did everything?
I did everything in the geological field.
As a geologist. And you also have some expertise on precious metals?
Precious gems, yes. I've been to Brazil many times searching for all of the wonderful precious stones that they have. Of course, being a woman as well as a geologist, I'm very fascinated by gems.
Yeah, of course, but it's not an easy job for a woman, or is
I
it?
was the only woman in my graduating class as a geologist.
Why you became interested in geology?
I honestly don't know. I just was always passionate about geology, and at this point in my life, I'm very, very happy for my chosen career. I really am.
In the book, it also shows that you have some expertise on Italian Renaissance, even the medieval times.
Yes, well, this happened by accident because I was working very hard as a geologist in the environmental field, cleaning up toxic waste. And for relaxation, I decided to take Italian lessons because I didn't know Italian. And that was my demise because I was introduced to Dante, to Cavalcante, and then I went on part-time, very slowly, to get a master's in Italian Renaissance studies.
Cavalcante.
I never heard of him before I started learning Italian, so it really changed my life.
I was intrigued by your book. I had never read a book like this, talking about Italy from a geological perspective at the first time. And I think you presented very good facts, and yet, as I said before, it reads like a novel. To talk about the geology, you really need to know a lot, but you combine geology with history and culture, and so it makes it very, very attractive. Did it take long for you to write the book?
Yes, it took a long time because I had started my research with Leonardo da Vinci, and once I found out he was a geologist, I started working on the article on the two versions of the Virgin of the Rocks.
Which you give an analysis, you make an analysis of the two.
I would show all the pictures to my geologist friends, and we were so excited.
We will talk about it a little later about that, because it's an important analysis that you do of the two paintings. Your theory is basically that geology is fundamental to any studies. This is the first time that I hear it, but it is fundamental in the fact that it affects the people in which they live. And from the beginning, from the birth to death, geology is involved. It affects just about everything humans do. In what sense? Now, you first go, of course, you say Italy is a good example of it. Mm-hmm. Why is it a good example?
It's a good example because Italy is like a patchwork quilt. Italy has so many different types of rocks and so many different types of environments, and it is, you know, a relatively small country, so you can really very closely correlate different cultural or artistic developments with the type of geology there. And I actually think you can do it elsewhere. I think you could do it in China, you could do it in America, you could do it in many of these countries. It's especially interesting, the countries that have a long history. You can really pull it together.
Talking of geology, I thought that you would have begun, for example, from the Alps down or from Sicily up, because even Sicily is a very geologically very important land. But you began with Tuscany or with that area. Why? Why do you feel
I went in chronological order from the civilizations. While Kuma and Ischia had the first settlements of the Greeks, the approach I took there was through Virgil's Aeneid, which came quite a bit later than the Etruscans. So the Etruscans inhabited the Italian peninsula from about 1200 BC. So I started with them.
But people on Sicily, when the Greeks arrived, or even Homer talks about it, they were already natives in Sicily.
Yes.
And of course, then we find out they're also in the middle of the peninsula. But you prefer, I imagine, the Etruscans.
I'm fascinated by the Etruscans, and quite frankly, I had much more information to work with. I think if I would have gone to Sicily and many of the Villanovan cultures, the book wouldn't have finished in my lifetime. So I had to be somewhat selective.
Now, who are the Etruscans?
The Etruscans were a fabulous civilization, and mysterious from the standpoint that their origins are kind of murky. Right now, the archaeologists feel that they've made the decision that they were an in situ culture that derived from a prior culture, the Villanovans. But they had a fantastic run from 1200 BC until they were absorbed by the Romans.
I'm glad you say
around the time of Christ.
Yeah. I'm glad that you said that they were absorbed, because eventually they became Romans themselves. Some other theory says that they were actually extinguished, either killed by the Romans or naturally extinct. But I believe that their techniques, technology transferred to Rome once Rome became dominant.
The Romans were fascinated with the Etruscans. In fact, the first Roman rulers were Etruscan kings, Tarquinius, and the fact was that they were in awe of the Etruscans' religion and their priests. So whenever the Romans had problems, they would always get an Etruscan priest in.
The way I read your book is that maybe their religion comes or is influenced by the Greeks.
I think their language definitely was influenced by the Greeks. But there again, it becomes murky, because you did have cross-pollination. But one thing was that their religion was very close to the land and close to nature, I will say. So they read lightning, they read thunder, they looked at what was happening where they put their settlements. So nature was a very important and fundamental part of their religion.
Mm. Did they have a language, a written language?
Yes, they did. They had the Etruscan language, which for a while was like the Rosetta Stone. It was undeciphered. But then they were able to read it, and now they can read it. But the Greeks were the people that gave them the written language. Unfortunately, most of the things that have survived from the Etruscans are basically tombstone incisions and little votive offerings.
There was no literature.
So we don't know much about their culture, other than what we can find from religion and geology.
Talking about tombstones, did they cremate their?
No, they had cremation. This is true, and they would put it in little urns that are beautiful. But the wonderful tombs that we can see today in Etruria and Tarquinia and in that whole area are majestic. What they would do is the very wealthy would carve out of the volcanic rock, the tuff, it's volcanic tuff, and they would make all these rooms. So when one generation died, they'd be in this room, and then the grandchildren would all have their rooms. So you can see today all these different rooms, and they're all frescoed because they believed that the funeral was a passage to another life. So you do have incineration and cremation, but the wealthy really had fantastic tombs.
So they built their tombs in caves. Is that, or the tuffs? What is the tuff exactly?
The tuff is a volcanic rock, and it's very made of very fine-grained material, and the beauty of it is soft. It's easy to excavate, but it maintains its architectural structure. So now, even after nearly 3,000 years, you can go into these tombs. It's unlike any other rock. So the rich would always look for a place that had this kind of volcanic rock, so they could have wonderfully architecturally detailed rooms.
Now this joins your geology idea. The caves were done into some kind of rocks, right?
Yes, and they had to be specific rocks.
Specific rock, like?
Like this volcanic tuff. This was the best.
Was there also limestone?
The limestone was rather deep. The limestone is more prevalent, like in Puglia area. It's much deeper in Tuscany.
The tuff, I believe the Italians still use tuff.
They still use it, yes, absolutely.
For construction of buildings.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So once they build up these caves, or sometimes they found their own natural caves, right?
Basically, they were carved out because these people were very wealthy. So either they were a tumulus form above ground, like a big round circle, and the rooms were inside, or else they were underground. So today, and you can see them all today, you go down about 20 stairs, and then these rooms open up, and they're all frescoed. You can see the tombs.
Amazing. They still exist today.
They're gorgeous.
Now, talking about caves, probably not in Tuscany, but in other area, are there many caves, natural caves in Italy?
Yes, there are, amazingly so. Italy has a lot of pockets of limestone, which was formed in an ancient sea that covered the area 250 million years ago, called the Tethys Sea. And this limestone, as it etches out by water containing mild amounts of acid, forms these beautiful caves and caverns. And of course, early man looking for shelter would go there. But then these caves became cult sites, sites of ritual, and we really don't even understand today.
So you find in Italy many caves, and also it has that religious aspect of it, cults, right?
Well, this was the interesting part about it, is that the prehistoric man collected drip water from the stalactites, and they put little ceramic vases to collect this water. And the archaeologists don't know why, because they had abundant drinking water. Now, we've analyzed this water, and this water has a lot of microbes and bacteria in it that promote healing. So we feel that people would ingest this water or massage this water on their breasts for abundant breast milk.
In fact, you talk about moonlight or
moon
milk.
Moon milk. This milky liquid that comes from the stalactites.
But that's rich in limestone, right?
Yes, it is, but it also has modern technology. We've analyzed this drip water, and it has different microbes in it that promote healing. Then what happened, over subsequent centuries, the Catholic Church came and took over these grottos. So you have many grottos dedicated to St. Michael, the Virgin Mary. And
so the cave has a special meaning, and that has to do with the geology.
Yes.
Of course, the Christians took that from the fact that Christ was born in a grotto.
Exactly,
So
exactly.
they continue to keep, but has a spiritual significance, maybe from ancient times when people lived in those caves.
Very much so. And the difference between Italy and other countries, for instance, in France, you have Lascaux.
Or Spain has.
Spain, Altamira. You have a lot of caves with prehistoric drawings on them. But you can't enter them now because they're endangered, or they're only, you know, only scholars can visit them. In Italy, they're all now religious sites or archaeological sites. You can still go into these caverns, and I think it's a marvelous continuity of the past that we can still enter these sacred spaces.
Now, this cave in, how do I call it, where the Romans used to have their baths, the Averno.
Yes.
The Sibyl, what is that, the cave of
the Cave of the Sibyl.
Is it still existence there?
It still exists, yes. This is right outside of Naples. And what happened is Virgil was born in Mantova, but he went down to Naples. He lived in Pozzuoli. And the Emperor Augustus says, come to Rome. I want you to be the poet in Rome. He said, I'm not leaving. And so he stayed in Pozzuoli, and he wrote the Aeneid there. He had in his backyard these fumaroles, these noxious vapors, these steaming, flaming.
They're still there.
They're still there today.
I've seen them myself.
So you can visit.
But, so he describes that as an entrance to the underworld.
The underworld, then Lake Averno. And Lake Averno is a crater lake, and at the time of Virgil, it emitted all these noxious vapors, and the birds wouldn't fly over it. So the word Avernus comes from the Greek meaning lacking in birds. And this, historically, in many cultures, these crater lakes are considered entrances to the underworld. It's
of course, Dante takes from Virgil.
Exactly.
And creates the
Mala Bolge, the funnel-shaped cavern where the deeper you go, the worse
Tell me about
the sinners.
result of the caves that when they were discovered, especially in Italy, the word grotesque comes about.
The word grotesque
what is that to do,
wonderful.
With what is related to grotesque? Literature,
well,
theater, architecture?
One day in the late 1400s, a boy was walking along a hill, and he fell into this hole. And he saw these magnificent frescoes, so he told people about it. And at the same time, Michelangelo, Raphael were working in the Vatican, so they decided to go down and see. And they went into this cavern, you know, with this rope, and they see this magnificent grotto.
Now, this was in the city of Rome.
This is in the city of Rome.
And it happens to be, the cavern is not a cavern.
It's not a cavern. It was Nero's home that was burned
a couple of years ago.
During the Great Fire. Well, Raphael decides, hey, I like this design. It hasn't been used in a couple thousand years. So he goes and he paints the loggia of the Vatican in this fantastic form that he stole from the Romans, and it was called grotesque in honor of the word grotto or grotta from the Latin, and that's the origin of the word grotesque.
And so Dante is influenced by Virgil, and he enters hell through a cave.
Yes,
and
he does.
Goes into the underworld, which he calls the Inferno. But you have much more on Dante than Virgil in this book, because you basically analyze the Paradiso, the third world. And I know that the Paradiso is a difficult poetry, because not many people may really understand. They try to avoid it. But Dante, in order to make the opposite of Inferno, which was very dark,
right,
in Paradiso, he makes light.
Exactly.
And brilliant light.
Exactly.
But also, he colors the area. Some places transparent, some places the rubies and the diamonds and all that. So to give it vivid, in order to describe the angels and the popes and the. So you made an analysis of this. How did you approach this? How did you come to with this? Because I think you have really a point there. He did take from the rubies and the diamonds,
right,
and the other.
Well, I was looking for geology in Dante, and I look for geology everywhere. And once I started to see that he used gems as metaphors, and I saw ruby, I saw diamond, then my antenna were up, and I decided, let me see all the different passages that he uses, and then how he uses these gems. And what astounded me was that Dante, let's say he wrote the comedy probably around 1300, and at that time...
He began on the 1300. It was a holy year. He went to Rome, and then he had a dream.
At that time, what was the state of gems and gem merchants? Because I found that his knowledge of various gems, for instance, a gem merchant has to have different names for different gems because it's their business. But I just found that Dante was amazing in his knowledge.
But
and
Italy
he knew
is not rich of gems, is it?
Not these gems. They all came in mainly through Venice and India and the Red Sea. And so obviously, in some way, shape, or form, he was in contact with gem merchants. But he uses the metaphors so beautifully. He understood the physics of light because he understands how light will refract and reflect off a gem, and then he takes this physics and uses it in the poetry, which was incredible.
We only have left a couple of more minutes, so we would like to talk about Da Vinci, because your title is Tweeting Da Vinci. How did you get to this title? Did you think, or who thought about tweeting Da Vinci? Why?
It was over drinks.
Over drinks?
Yes. And we needed a title that conveyed a modern take on Da Vinci.
But Da Vinci lately has had so much controversy and mystery, records or whatever. But of course, it's up to that kind of. But do you think Da Vinci would have really liked tweeting? It's so limited.
I think he tweeted in his lifetime. I know he did, as a matter of fact.
Trying to communicate
all of his
with
little
people?
Notes, he talked to people, and what happened was either the people stole his ideas, or they didn't understand his ideas, or they lay fallow and they were lost.
So tweeting in the sense that he tried to communicate, tell people, and just that people would not understand what he was saying because he was ahead of his time.
He was ahead of his time. I think he would have been tweeting. He was tweeting in his lifetime.
One more thing I believe is very important, because you give an analysis of it, of the Virgin of the Rocks.
Yes.
There are two versions. One is in Paris, in Louvre, and the other one is in the National Gallery in London.
Yes.
And you analyze these two. One, they cannot be possible made by Da Vinci.
I don't think so, because
and you discovered this.
The geology is different in the two.
It's amazing how
the geology is completely different.
So what is the difference? Let's say the one
the geology in the Louvre version is very accurate. Not only the geology, but the botany.
Now, Da Vinci, if I remember well, whenever he uses portrait like Mona Lisa, there's always mountains in the background, something in the distance. So how do you see that the background, it tells you that one may be fake and the other one may be the original?
Because geology is the key to the authenticity for Leonardo.
Because he was so advanced in geology?
Everything, even his students, everything he wrote about, everything he sketched reflected accurate geology. That's the key to authenticity for Leonardo. So basically
you say that in the background you see the layers of geological formations that in the other one it's not there, it's just a painting there, coloring.
Exactly.
But in Da Vinci you can actually see the formations.
And identify all the formations, and they're very complicated. And the botany is correct, whereas in the London version it's not.
Da Vinci did use a scientific system of observation, right? Did he?
Yes, he did. He had an incredible eye, and also he was a great observer of nature. He would go out into the Alps when he worked in Milan, and he would study, and that's when he would tweet little things like, I see fossils at the top of the mountain here. How is this possible? And he would want to go back and research it.
But now the fossils on the mountain was already in the Bible.
Yes, and he went against the Bible because he felt that the earth could not be 6,000 years old. He felt the earth had to be older, and he really was in a lot of trouble with the church because you couldn't say things like that.
Well, we leave the trouble maybe for another time, but
Okay.
I think our time is over.